Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Fergal Coleman is my name. I'm a co-founder and a director here at Symphony 3. Many of you have been on these sessions before, so you'll know me well. Today's session is about how local governments can leverage AI to empower local communities with Belinda Hodkinson. Belinda, we'll introduce you shortly, but you're very welcome. Delighted to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Before we begin, let me just, I'd like to do the acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Symphony 3 acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Okay, the agenda today, I'll go through a little bit of housekeeping and just set the context for the webinar. That'll take me about 3 or 4 minutes. We'll then introduce Belinda for a discussion. We'll go for about 30 to 40 minutes covering the current AI landscape, real world examples, some practical tips on using AI, and then try and tie it back to the series in general and what this means for the connected citizen. We'll keep, somewhere in around 20 minutes for questions, but ask questions as we go. So anyone who's been on these sessions know that we run them pretty informally. It's really shared learning. It's going to be pretty conversational today, Belinda, I believe. If people have to go early, the session will be recorded and we'll make it available for everybody. But I certainly encourage people to pop questions in the chat box as we go. We've got Eamon Dooley, our consultant here, helping us today as well. How are you, Eamon?
Good, thanks, Fergal. How are you going?
Good, good. Okay. Connected Citizen webinar series. So this is number 8 of our series. You'll see the kind of the topics. We've had a broad range of topics that we've covered over the last couple of years. We've had speakers we've had thought leaders from overseas come into some of the sessions. We've had experts such as Belinda who've joined us on specific topics. We've had local government senior people as well join us. So it's all really about learning around this notion of how do we improve the citizen experience using digital transformation. It's not done willy-nilly, so we try and build the sessions and the around our digital maturity matrix, and specifically the kind of the 6 topics or sections you see down the side there. So strategy, citizen service, internal stakeholders, technology, processes, and metrics. Of course, in reality, all these overlap in each of our sessions, but the thought process is that each of those sections is a piece of the digital transformation jigsaw, and if we get them right, we can start driving real digital transformation in the sector. So today, AI, of course, is technology, but it covers a whole lot of other things, as I'm sure Belinda will tell us about. Before we get started, one of the things we've got some councils interested in working together to pilot some AI technologies. So we are putting out an expression of interest to people on this call, councils, all sizes from all over Australia. I know we've got people from I think pretty much every state. So if you're interested in learning more, please complete the form. And I might get you to just throw that link into the chat box for people who are listening and who are interested. Now to the main business. Today's session on how local governments can leverage AI to empower local communities. Delighted to welcome Belinda Hodkinson here today. Belinda is a digital transformation strategist and expert. I know she's worked closely with our CEO, Tom Hines, in the past. But Belinda, I might get you to give us a little bio of yourself for a couple of minutes before we get cracking.
Yeah, absolutely. Digital transformation strategist is my background, which is heavily influenced by my qualifications in strategic management and digital business. So I really focus on the whole enterprise types of solutions, and are really driven by how can that help you achieve your strategic goals that you're trying to aim for. So it's trying to embed everything in there together.
You've
I've
worked
been,
across quite a few industries, I believe.
oh yeah, a lot of industries, a lot of different industries. So started off in architecture and engineering, followed through to construction, and now have been going through a whole heap of different professional services, from universities to pharmaceutical, to a whole heap of different areas now.
And I know you've run a few workshops around local government. I'm pretty sure a couple of people on this session may have experienced some of your workshops.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been lucky enough to be invited by DELWP was previously DELWP, to a lot of the sessions, based on all the different types of technologies and platforms everybody was using, and how to advance in those platforms and those sorts of things. So all the different councils together, just coordinating and collaborating together.
Right. Well, we're absolutely delighted and privileged to have you here. So let's crack on in. I know we've done it around a couple of kind of key questions, which we've got up on the screen. So the question number one for you, Belinda, to get you started, what are some of the insights you can kind of share about the current AI landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the moment it's hitting that kind of inflection point, isn't it? Where we're getting a lot of people that are starting to advance into this particular space and are starting to talk about it. For me, it was actually back in 2013 where I started to see the knowledge graph that was coming through in all of the search engines and how that was working. And I saw one of the largest software developers in the construction industry start to create their own knowledge graphs as well. And I thought, oh gosh, how are they organizing all of that information together? What kind of data is that giving them, and what insights? And sure enough, today we're now looking at it from a generative design perspective, right, where they've used all of that information to try and get there. But I think one of the most interesting and exciting parts about the industry at the moment is that, because it's so mainstream with the natural language processes that we've used, so ChatGPT, Bard, those kind of things, it's now turned into it's converting itself into a lower barrier of entry now. It's a little bit easier for us to get in there. But if we start to think, even just, 5 years ago, not even 5 years ago, the process for you to pick the right type of AI that's going to help your business was such a tedious and long process for you to do it. You know, a great example I was thinking of was, you've got your complaint definitions that you need to go through for your all of the complaints that are coming through, and how do you analyze those and categorize those. And in the earlier days, you're going through saying, okay, well, that's the problem. The data sets that you have, you've got labeled data sets, so instantly you know that that's supposed to be a structured learning plan that you're going through. So you're supervising that learning plan for it to proceed through that. And then you're saying, okay, well, what type of model am I going to use? It's going to be a classification model. And then from that classification model, you then decide on what type of algorithm you're going to use, which, that's a lot of effort to go through to try and figure out the types of results. And I'm not saying that that's gone away, but what I am saying is, with the new stuff that's coming through, particularly the large language models and those sorts of things that have helped train ChatGPT, and as well as Bard and those sorts of platforms, is that it's created a new world of pre-trained data. So all those foundation models have got a whole heap of pre-trained data for us now. So we don't have to go through all of those intricate steps to try and create the right type of solution for our business. And the cool part about that is the vendors have realized that as well. So now they're grabbing hold of it and making it even easier for us as they start to implement these into their platforms. So now we've got wizards and workspaces and things like that just basically talk us through what would be five lines of code, really, but they've made it into a nice interface for us, and have told us this is the way to integrate this into your business or into that particular task. So I think the mainstream effect of it is where it's definitely changed the landscape, and exciting, right?
Yeah, I think we were on a session in 2021 with Dr. Mark Thompson from the UK, and he kind of blew my mind at the time. He talked about a book called Life 3.0, which is by an MIT professor, and it just talked about the exponential rate of AI once it got going.
Mm.
And then he gave us a great example of, being able to use AI with Swindon Council, I think it was, for picking up fly tipping, which was a great practical example that I still think is hugely relevant. But even back then, I think it was difficult for people to contextualize this. What ChatGPT has done is just kind of allowed people to touch the tool in a very practical sense. And then, of course, the other thing is that you're learning about ChatGPT 4, and people are telling you how much more powerful it is, which gives you a sense of how exponential and how fast this thing is moving.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the parameters, we were having a look from when they first started in terms of these the large learning models that were behind it and the parameters that it was going through. It started off as something like 117 million and has gone into the trillion kind of space now. And I think it was something like 145, what was it, 145 something million% it has improved in 5 years. I've never seen a growth model like that in your life, right? Like it's quite amazing in how quickly it's
Yeah.
developed.
I was at the MAV MavTech conference yesterday, and it was all about AI. And I mean, the lesson is this is not going away. We've got to start thinking about how it's going to be used. But Adam Spencer was one of the keynote speakers, and he talked about how quickly this thing has advanced since 1985, when I think Gary Kasparov was able to beat 32 computers in one go.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, he got beaten by DeepMind. Then there was some other example, and then he went to today, where ChatGPT, or one of these language models or AI models, was able to train itself within 4 hours and would still easily beat the best chess player today. It's just mind blowing.
It's definitely picked up a lot, right? It's making it a lot more clearer now, I think, of where it can go and the possibilities of where it can go.
Yeah.
And how much it's going to change our industries for sure.
So tell us about why these changes are impacting local government.
Because it's coming from every single direction.
Yeah.
I think you've got your overarching government strategy that's about how we're embedding AI into our Australian community ethos, all the rest of it, right? It's going through those sorts of processes. The other ones around the expectations from the citizens. They're expecting you to approach this now, and I think also the changes to your workforce. So this space isn't different to any other business across Australia at the moment as well, right? We're all thinking about it from a governance perspective. So what is it that we need to do from an ethical perspective and those sorts of things. So the government strategy has things like our ethical standards framework. We've got the 8 principles that we need to follow for developing AI. And then now it's also considered that it's the the critical technologies in the national interest list, which then means that it has a heavy impact on our economic prosperity, our national security, as well as our social cohesion. So that puts a lot of responsibility on the different tiers of government when you start to think about those ethical standards and how you're going to make sure that as you're embedding this AI, you're considering these sorts of things, because you're going to have a lot of other conflicting data that's coming through from all of your citizens and those sorts of things as well. So they're going to expect you to be utilizing AI in a way that streamlines their service. They want to be able to interact with this. If they can get that service somewhere else and it's quicker and it's easier, they're going to want it from you as well. And then I think on top of that, they're also expecting you to protect them in a way as well. So when we start to look at the different types of installations that we're doing around this space and how AI can embed itself into these different sorts of platforms and systems, particularly the data that's collected at the edge. So, when we're talking about information that's collected at the edge and what it's doing with that, they're expecting you to have a bit of an idea about what it's doing and how it's going to impact them as well as citizens. But then that final piece is really around, what does it mean for your workforce? And for me, this is really interesting because implementing digital transformation and digital change, I often see that there's people that might have, I suppose, hidden a little bit underneath your processes and things like that they might not have had as much knowledge as they needed in particular roles. And when you start to change these digital implementations, they build an emphasis on those skills and the fact that you actually need to know what you're doing to make sure that you're using this properly. And we're already seeing this with AI in terms of the way it's coming in and its generative design processes, is that if you don't know or understand your skill set or your vocation well enough, you're going to bubble up to the surface really, really quickly, and it's going to highlight you. So dealing with that change management process of your staff and making sure that they're aware of what's coming, helping them realize how that's going to work for them, so there isn't that negative pushback that you might get from staff members.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the key pieces here as well. And then once you start to get those sorts of things right, you can then start to uplift the pace of your implementation because everyone knows that they're supported and those kind of things. But yeah, I mean, just those alone, right? Those three categories. It's a pretty enormous area that's going to impact the way that you operate and manage a council or a government body, really.
Do you think it's this is a question without notice, but councils and local government, they've got plenty of constraints, or rate capping hasn't helped it in terms of technology. Is this kind of a leapfrog technology, do you think? In that, they've been trying to get their data right, they've been trying to get CRM systems in place. Does AI complicate that, or does it make it easier?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think it's yes in both. So there's ways of you can do this really wrong. And so a great example of that, and we were just talking about the classification of data and information. If you say that you've got a particular type of problem and you decide to utilize a model that might give you the answer to that problem, it hasn't given you the cause and effect. It might not have given you the cause and effect because you've picked the wrong one. So an unsupervised model is a great example of that. It gives you an answer, but it doesn't give you how it got to the answer. And so therefore, if they reference it as the basic example of being customer churn. You've got people that have left your business or have left, complaints with you or something like that. You can figure out the commonalities of how you got to that point when you have that structured approach. If you use the unstructured, you're unlikely to figure that out. You don't know how to change a business to get that effect. So I think there's definitely pros and cons to the way that you approach this. But the classification systems and all of those sorts of things that are coming out to have a look at your data and understand your data far more efficiently, the types of knowledge graphs that they're actually setting up. So each platform will have some different type of knowledge graph that you can pick. And they definitely categorize your data a lot quicker for you. No more of this itemizing in intricate detail.
Yeah. Before I jump to the next question, I'm going to put a question out to the audience, because I think this will help the conversation, I guess, in the next question. Of the participants on this session, I'd like to know how many of you have actually had a play with some of these new AI technologies. There's a number of tools out there, but it would be good to get a couple of raised hands and a couple of comments of the tools that people have used and what they're using them for over the next. So we'll give people maybe 30 seconds to do that. So please don't be shy. I think this is all really quite important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Bruce, yeah. Good to see you're playing around with this stuff, Bruce. So while those are coming in, Belinda, let's talk a little bit about how you think how local councils can start thinking about AI and using it. Let's see how it correlates with some of the answers we're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I always look at it from a digital transformation perspective as well. So we're trying to embed all these sorts of things together. And there are three core areas that you look at that from. So one is your customer experiences. That's the very first sort of area. The second area is around your operational processes. So how do we optimize all of those?
Yeah.
And then the last one is around your business model or your service change. So how are you going to change the way that you actually deliver your services as well? So if we go into a bit of detail around those, so the customer experiences, it's about your customer knowledge. So how can we utilize some of these technologies to understand our customer a little bit better?
Yeah.
And the next one is the type of engagement. So how do we engage with our customers more effectively as well? And then the last one is around your customer journey. So we've seen a lot of those that have started to come through from like things like chatbots and personalized environments and those sorts of things. I think the second one from your operational processes, that's the space that I definitely love to play in. For me, that's getting into the weeds and the messiness of how businesses have grown and how departments have grown and expanded and interlocked with some other one, and we've got a mess of spaghetti, and how can we straighten that out and start to have a look at how we can optimize all of our services and processes that we have there. So automating your administration tasks is one of the biggest ones. It doesn't matter what industry you come from. Like I was with a pharmaceutical group the other week, and we were going through, roughly we spend about 2 hours every day searching for information. We spend about half an hour to an hour every day looking at timesheets. Like the administration tasks alone, when you start to automate some of these processes, the efficiencies that you throw back into your departments and those sorts of things are huge. Then on top of that, any sort of the workflow processes to enable your staff and those sorts of things turn out to be a really big thing as well. So if they've got workflows and quality checks and all of those sorts of things, if you start to utilize these technologies to develop that for you, so it automates those processes, so it gives you a dashboard that tells you how they're all progressing, those sorts of things, that's where AI really starts to I suppose, help your business progress in that particular space as well. And I think the last, sorry, you go. I can talk forever.
Keep going. You're on a roll. Keep going. Some of the answers that have come in are ChatGPT and people using it. I've had, so I think we've had Anthony talk about using ChatGPT to write his strategy. Hopefully you checked it, Anthony, before you submitted it. We've got Tom using DALL-E and ChatGPT.
For the images.
We use it ourselves to I use it to just help me frame some of the content that I write, and get my ideas together. It helps you collect your thoughts. And one of the examples I heard used was that it's like having 50 or 500 interns available to you. Or even 5,000, but of course it doesn't do away with the fact that somebody has to check this stuff before it gets submitted.
Yeah, exactly. I think and one of the biggest things around that is how do you also bring a little bit of that model back into your business to protect everything that you're putting out there as well. And definitely we've seen from some of the bigger businesses at the moment where they've decided, okay, we've got so many staff members that are jumping out into ChatGPT to ask questions and work with that. How about we set a bit of a foundation model up inside of our business walls? So then we can interact with that information ourselves, protect what we're putting in there, but also have it reference all of our own data as well. So it starts to become more connected to the way that your business works, as well as protecting all of those ideas and strategies that you have in place out there. But I'm with you. Love it in terms of being able to communicate with it and explore new ideas with it, I think is the other thing too, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So as soon as you start to say, okay, let's put in, for me, it's about being bold. I have a big thing about we've got to be bold and courageous and step into these sorts of spaces. And I love the fact that you could go in and have a full conversation around thinking around this, what do you think? And it goes off and collects a whole heap of data from other areas, and you can keep on taking it further and further.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, let's jump in then. Have you got any examples or any concrete examples of how local councils are starting to use this technology or to use these technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like rather than going sort of specifically on things that I've looked at, I had a look globally to see what else is available and those kind of things as well. So we'll keep it to, I suppose, those three core areas that I just spoke about. So one is the customer, the customer engagement or the customer journey and their journey with you. I think all of us have heard of everything that's going on with all the different types of chatbots that everybody's implemented. And I know there's a few people on the call today that would have tried to implement this into their own businesses as well. The thing with it at the moment is that, yep, chatbots are pretty simple processes, but with these new foundation models that are coming up, which is the communication aspect that those sorts of models bring, it's making it a lot easier for your citizens to communicate with you based on this information. But what I really like about it is, one, its entry level is quite cheap to be able to get into there. So when we say that, we're looking more at, you know, just over a couple of $1,000s to jump in and get yourself started, depending on who you have your platform with and those sorts of things, of course. But once you get in there, what you're doing then is saying, okay, here's all the information that I have on the website that's publicly available at the moment. And whether it's in a workspace or a wizard or something like that, you can throw that kind of information into that platform straight away. So we think of, yeah, we'd probably have that somewhere in a location. So it's pretty easy for us to throw that in there. Then from that, it's then deciding on, well, what kind of sentiment do we want these sorts of chatbots to have? And this is the part that I love about it, because you've built this, they've got the foundation model, it's gone out, it's learnt from everything that's on the internet and those sorts of things, knows how to create a conversation, understands the intricacy of different types of cultures and things like that might be in there, depending on which model you pick. And when you go in there and say, okay, my sentiment for this particular area is this, and this is the type of cultural things that we have occurring in this area, this is the type of responses that I want you to respond with, it starts to really help you frame, this is what our persona might be for our particular area. And then from that, you can then say, okay, whenever somebody asks a question about this particular topic, so let's just say it's, I don't know, a fence permit or something like that they're putting through, that customer is always going to have to go through 2 or 3 different departments, right? Regardless. So first it's going through the permit, second it's then going through advertising, whatever those different sort of key areas might be for you, and that experience is pretty tedious. So having a chatbot that can connect through those, and you've actually embedded that data in there, so whenever somebody asks a question about this, connect it to this data and this data, then that starts to enhance those chatbots and those sorts of things to make them work a little bit more effectively. So I've gone out and tried some of the ones that some of the councils have put out there so far, and have had a look at it and thinking, actually, yeah, there are some areas that we could probably improve in some of those to build it up and then really have it interacting. So the user experience is yeah, it's a bit more fluid.
I think Devonport in Tasmania were one of the early users of a chatbot, and I know that the city of Kingston also had invested in using them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Devonport's, they called it Rose. Rose was the name, and sent it out to the rest of their staff members to ask them what that should be. And yeah, definitely have trialed that one as well. So yeah, I think that's the first one to have a look at, is around how can you improve your customer journey, and how do you go about that. The next one I think is really around your optimizing your processes. And I had a look at the laser scanning perspectives, but this is mostly from an image recognition perspective on like your pavement and road conditions and those sorts of things. So we could think of these in terms of footpaths, or we can think about these in terms of roads. But collecting data and information very, very quickly. So some of these can scale right up and down depending on how detailed you want these models to be. But I think it was Port Phillip Council was working with Fulton Hogan and a few others, I think, around how do they go through and scan all of their data and information based on their roads, that then gives them a condition map of all of those roads, and the particular areas of those conditions, and defines the criticality of those particular cracks in the roads, to then understand, well, how much uplift is needed, what kind of expenses are needed, and those sorts of things. Because I know many of the councils have used different types of pavement modelling systems and those sorts of things to look after road pavements, and you classify your roads and you say, based on this World Bank algorithm. This is this is how often we would maintain these types of roads and things like that. But when you start to utilize these sorts of platforms, you can really maximize the impact and create some efficiencies there around that as well. Obviously, each council is different. Some councils have that service that's provided externally, some do it internally, depending on which way you approach it. But
I think the other
yeah.
thing here, Belinda, is, as these tools, people are going to be using, and they already are, people are going to be using AI, even though they don't know they are, or that, it'll be embedded in a lot of these tools, as much as, that they'll be creating their own AI, I suppose. Just a quick one. The chat was not working for a few people. I think Eamon has managed to get it working, so apologies for that. It would have been good to have an AI assistant to figure that out. But if you were trying to put any comments into the chat, please fire away.
I like that question. Did ChatGPT help figure it out? Nice response straight away.
Yeah, well, Anthony just said, did ChatGPT help me work it out? You're one step ahead of me, Anthony. Thank you. The other example, and you might actually have it, Anthony, was the Swindon example. I know that case study is available maybe for people to have a look at, and I think it kind of very similar to what Belinda's talking about there. Been able to identify waste on the ground, on the street, with really simple, easy, low-cost cameras, and then been able to from there schedule out your trucks to go and pick up the right waste in the right place. Can save a huge amount of money.
I think the other piece here is, so there's an astronomical amount that we can start to have a look at from an asset and facility maintenance perspective, which we know is a large area of expenditure and those sorts of things. So to improve how we're collecting data and information, then how we're reacting to that information within that space, there's definitely AI that can assist with that. But I think the one thing that we do miss quite often, and I mentioned it just before, is really around those administrational type of tasks, because they do take so much out of a day. And when you think about it just in a time period, sure, that's a lot, but it's also a thought process period. So I know myself, it takes me, a good 15 minutes to 45 minutes sometimes, depending on how big the task is, to get out of where my headspace was to then get into something else. And I think we miss those kind of things when we start to think about these process enhancements. So for me, anything that you can automate in those particular spaces, which we've seen some of them do, from automatic responses with your emails. So how do we then start to classify those emails? How do we respond to those emails? Those sorts of things, just helping you rather than, trying to think about those solutions, but then also connecting them to different aspects of your business as well. So making sure that the data is all coming into one area, that you can all interact with it together. And yeah, a bit of a process connection to it as well. One of the key things that AI brings up to the table is that it's about you having autonomy a little bit yourself as well. So in terms of having to write a report all the time to say, yes, I've delivered this in this particular way in that particular manner, AI can now help you from a workflow process and allow you to say, what, I've done this, it's automated in the system, you can see it in the system, and the AI can generate that. Of course, it doesn't have to be AI all the time as well. I probably should mention that too. Yeah. It's just these sorts of AI aspects obviously enhance and help it, right? And make that, you don't have to question it as much because you're not thinking about the code that's connecting everything.
Yeah. A couple of comments just as we're going. I've got Adele saying, interesting that AI makes sense and is likely to build from the identification of condition. But capacity to respond may not necessarily catch up in speed, which is a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's where your improvement piece is, isn't it? It's saying, okay, well, where does your optimization need to be across your business? So if it is around either internal or external suppliers to do that, how do you then start to automate their processes as well? So the key piece might not be just in defining it. It could be, as she says, or as they say, responding to it as well.
Yeah. What do you think? And I'm kind of maybe going off piste a little bit here, but in terms of how is it going to change how councils, the culture within councils, and also how the training and development happens in councils?
Yeah,
You got a
that's a really
perspective on
good.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question, I think, because I go through when I hold these sort of workshops with people is around what change feels like. So the different types of levels of change and what they feel like and how AI can make you feel. And the first one is about this incremental change level, which is it just happens to me. So they're just small things that happen to me. So that's the administrational type stuff, which feels a little bit uncomfortable. You're okay with it. You can accept those sorts of changes. Process change is where things start to feel really weird, like you instantly want to go back to the old way of doing something because your processes have changed pretty significantly. And those are the ones where we need to really rein in on the change management kind of processes there. And for me, when we run these sorts of workshops, is I will definitely go through, we want everybody's ideas. I'm not interested in hearing from, particular head departments and those sorts of things. We get as much data and information from everyone as we can, because that information then tells us, one, are they going to be okay with a process change? Because they might not be at all. And two, well, then we need to figure out how we're going to manage that kind of process. And then the large one, in terms of the big business change and the business model change, you feel like you have no clue on how to deliver anymore because the business model has changed so significantly that you're not used to it. And the change plan that has to come in on top of that is so incredibly balanced and so incredibly slow. But what it does do is that it helps everybody understand, okay, these are the steps for me to get there. And this is how different that's going to be. And the business is supporting me to achieve that. So I think that's a big key thing around making sure that when you're going through designing your strategic change is making sure that you hit those levels properly and understand the impacts that it's going to make to your business, connecting that back to your overarching strategies in terms of your costs and optimizations that you want to try and create and experiences you want to try and create. And then on top of that, what kind of support mechanisms that you need to put in. So you've mentioned a little bit about training and development and those sorts of things. For me, if you start to frame this from their idea in the first place, the buy-in is incredibly different. So if you've got a whole heap of staff members that have come up in a 2-hour workshop to say, hey, answering all these emails all the time, this is really tricky. It's a very easy process to bring that information up to the flow and then start to create a learning plan around that because they're excited about it and they want to do it. And I think that's the biggest thing to realize when you're looking at that change management and training process. Sorry, I could rabble on for ages for that one.
Keep going. This is good.
I love
There's a
that
comment in
space.
there from Anthony saying he's loving the conversation. So let's keep going. Right. So council's thinking about starting this thing. Like, have you got any tips? So where should they start? What are practical tips for them to get started, Belinda? What would you be suggesting?
Yeah. So I'm biased for starters because I'm always going to say that it should be an enterprise-wide solution because that's what I'm about, right? So I don't like, I suppose, ad hoc spending on things that might not affect an entire business and might not be in the right space. So I always have a look at, as an example, come into a business and say, okay, whereabouts might we be having our most difficulties? Where are we least performing? Where are we least losing our revenue? Where are the costs that are so significantly high? That kind of stuff first to understand, okay, what kind of impact do we want to make? So that pulls up a bit of a table and a graph that says, all right, I take that now to the leadership team and I say, look, I can make a small change in this very big area of your business, which means that we're going to uplift really, really quickly, those sorts of things, but it could impact if it has a negative result to it. Yeah. So that's the first kind of piece to it. Or I could make a really big change, this insignificant piece, like it's a tiny piece of this business or process, and I can make a really big change. But when you do that to that particular group, the rest of the groups that are sitting around you or departments or whatever classification you have for these might not even care. whatever, you could only go up with that particular group anyway. So they don't try and interact with that too much. So you've got to hit that sort of sweet spot around, okay, what is it that we need to implement? How do we need to go about it to actually make an impact to the business? So that's the first step for me, is where do I make it? What is it? What area is it? And it does tend to fall in those three categories that I've been honing on about as we go through this chat, which is, your customer experience, your optimization, or big business change. So once you figure those items out, then we say, okay, whereabouts now in those steps is this not working? So, and what I tend to love to do is I want to hear everything that you hate about your job. That's the very first item that I'll talk to everybody about. Tell me what it is that you hate about your job. And it's always great as an external person to do that, because sometimes when you're asking your own staff members, they won't tell you. So coming in and asking those kind of questions is fantastic, because you get a very blunt, very real and raw perspective on how they feel about how things are going. Once you have that list together, you can then work with the leadership team and say, okay, this is the sentiment that's coming through in this particular space now. I know that there's some solutions here around AI that we can start to have a look at. But before we do that, maybe we go back to them and say, okay, we've taken on board that you've said these are the processes that you hate. Can you tell me what that future might look like? How does that look like to you in the future? And I hate to use the word utopia because of the TV show and all those sorts of things. But if you do ask them, well, what does it look like in terms of that utopian view? You get some pretty great insights to the fact that a lot of the time they're workflow problems. It could be, there's different processes in there that are just a process for process sake. They've been there for 20 years. Nobody understands why we still do it, but it's still there, that kind of stuff. And you can start to refine that a little bit more. Once you do that, you then have an idea, okay, AI can assist in these particular areas. You then understand the different types of models. So earlier I talked to you about the classification type of model, and then underneath classification, you're deciding what algorithm and those sorts of things. Once you create that list of those, you then have a functional brief. And that functional brief then helps you say, okay, I now have this as a tick box kind of area and items that I need to look at when I take that to have a chat with the different types of vendors that are out there. So, there's AWS, there's Azure, there's IBM, there's Google, there's a whole heap of different ones for you to pick from, right? And then when you've got that functional list, you can go in and say, okay, I need these particular models to do this work for my team. But can your system do it in this particular way? These are the results that I need. So that functional brief turns into your guiding partner, your guiding principles as you go in and ask, well, what kind of platforms you need to implement in terms of your strategy. Once that happens, then you go through your whole change management sort of process and those sorts of things. But yeah, they're the kind of core steps.
Yeah.
And for us, we have our own model that we work through. So we call it the UC model, which is USI, and it's based on UC, the digital transformation that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And through that, we go through, okay, let's understand. So that's the U portion. Let's understand where we're at. Yeah. Then we go through the S portion, which is a strategy. So you go through design. Define, design, develop kind of aspects, and then you go through your implementation strategy around that as well. So it's those three sort of core steps and the different models based on your different business needs and those sorts of things that we connect that for you. So yeah, make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just keeping a track of time. We're plenty to talk about. I guess let's jump into the last kind of question that we had organized, and then we can open it up to questions from the floor. So let's tie it back to connected citizens and how will AI empower connected citizens in line with I guess the series that we run here.
Yeah. I really love this because I suppose my focus or emphasis on this kind of thing is what we've spoken about in terms of that engagement and those kind of things. But then also, how does this open up a brand new world for all of the citizens that are within within your space as well. We were working with I'm going to say a different council. Probably shouldn't mention it yet because I don't think we've released all the papers of it yet. But within that council, we were looking at, okay, well, how do we create a whole heap of data sources that are available for all of them to utilize and to help their business? And one of the key things that came out of the workshops was it's not just about our business, but it's also about all of our operational costs and things like that. So having all of that data and information together for us to then say, okay, we're all in exactly the same building or something like that, and we actually want to have different energy, consumption values that are added to our building. How do we actually achieve that and work together based on that? Other great examples that I've seen from across the globe have been, okay, we've got data and information that actually the council has utilised, which has been, we've got this low socioeconomic area that has overlaid with additional data that says that they're paying a lot of money for their power and energy sources within that space. And then they had a whole heap of data that was based on, well, that area has actually got a large heat island effect that's occurring within there. So they're all paying for, all of their energy in terms of air conditioning and those sorts of things. So the next initiative is, let's use that to plant large, tree canopies in the area to try and reduce that heat impact and try and help that low socioeconomic area balance out a little bit more, right? So these are the sorts of things. So for me, it's about data and information, which probably doesn't necessarily kick into that AI space, but it does if you let it interact and automate some of those processes, I suppose.
Great. I might open it up to questions. We're on 45 minutes now. While I'm doing that, so please, any questions you've got coming, I have had a couple of private ones come through. First one is for me, though. Any tools that you play around with at the moment that you'd recommend, just to on a lighter note?
Oh, that's a really good one. Look, I'm very much a presentation type of person. So I do a lot of PowerPoint presentations and take people on journeys and things like that. So Midjourney is the one that I kind of love to play around with. I also use some of the Adobe products from a personal perspective as well. So I definitely enjoy that. So yeah, that's me.
I was looking at Poe.com, which is kind of which I thought was quite good, which kind of gives you access to some of the various models. Just put it in the list there for people if they haven't had a play. That's not a bad place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. There's hundreds of different ones so there's a website that actually has all the different AI platforms that are out there. So it's collated all of them.
Yeah.
And it changes every single day. I'll have to try and find it for you, but it shows all the different types of businesses that are looking at AI at the moment, and you basically get a brand new list every single day of
I think
who's
there's one
releasing what.
called there's an AI for that.com,
Yeah.
which has hundreds in there as well.
Yeah.
Some of the risks. So what are the risks that councils should be aware of around AI in your opinion?
Yeah, I think when we start to use the models that are trained on external data and information, there is the risk of it pulling the bias that comes from all of that data and information. So don't forget that a lot of these models are trained from, scraping websites and those sorts of things. So anything from a conspiracy theorist through to a researcher that's just trying to research something that's a different bit weird and wacky that might be out there as well. You've got all of that data and information that's coming into the one space. So if you're picking a particular type of platform, I'd be talking to them to understand, well, how are they analyzing that data that has trained the model, to then go, yep, they've got some kind of governance over the top of that. The cheaper they are, the less likely they are to have those sort of governance types of aspects over the top of them. So for me, that's the biggest piece, is if you're going to use those foundation models to get started, then definitely be careful of that.
I think there's some cultural things in there as well. I mean, it's so easy for us to go in and, ask one of these models to give us an answer to something. There's a massive danger that documentation or content can go out on in the simplest example, go out onto websites and into documents that hasn't been checked.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
inaccurate.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think there's three kind of areas of where we're all focused in this AI space of risk, and the first area is around that governance space. So it's how do I protect my brand? How do I protect my staff and my clients? And then also how do I protect everything else that I'm affecting? So what kind of impacts that I might have? Then from the next level, you're then looking at, well, how do I differentiate myself? How do I make sure that, we're performing the way that we need to be performing, and those sorts of things? And so what do I use from an AI perspective around that? To the bottom one being, well, how do I train everybody? Those are kind of the three core dilemmas around risk that we have in that particular space.
Question here from Anthony. I think it's a question, Anthony. Quality data creation, break silos. Isn't that an early step to inform change process and what you don't know? I don't know if you can answer that, or if you have a comment on that, Belinda.
No, I completely agree. So it's about, you've got an enormous amount of data and information, and people have been organized in some sort of groups where they have gone through and tried to analyze that data and information well enough, and tag it and itemize it, and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But when we start to have a look at it, some of these classification types of models, it'll come over and itemize all of that data and information and make it a lot clearer and a lot more efficient for you to understand, particularly internally, even about how things are running. Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, though, you might think that just organizing your data is a good enough thing to do to get you started, to get some information out of it. But from an operational perspective, you know where to then connect that information to. And I think that that's the biggest piece there, is that, yeah, data can tell you one story, but the way you're operating tells you another.
Leaders. So, you've got local government leaders. They all tend to be probably somewhere either side of my age, and maybe a little bit younger, but often quite older. Any advice for leaders? How do they get to grips with this, or how do they unleash AI in their organizations in a good way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't think it matters your age, to be quite honest. I don't think it has a lot to do with it. I think, the more experience that you have, the more you understand what risks are out there in terms of general. If we release something that has this kind of data, we know the impacts that might make. If we speak in this particular type of way, if we respond in this particular type of way, we know that this is the impact that's going to have. That's incredible insight into what you can generate. So I think for me, again, it's still honing in on, well, what do I actually need? Because it's so easy to just pick a shiny toy out there at the moment. There are so many businesses that are selling their worth around, this is this cool app that I've developed, or something like that. And I think the biggest thing is be careful of that, and concentrate 100% on what you need. So getting that functional brief right in terms of what you need will then help you make better decisions around which AI solutions that you need to put in place.
Great. Have we any further questions from the floor? Well, people are, we'll give it a minute to see if there's any more to come through, Belinda, but I'm going to ask you if for people in local government, what are the three things they should do as a result of having listened today? What should they go away and try and do in their business, or what can they do in their business?
That's a really good question. They do. I think maybe having a look at a little bit of a pattern around, okay, from your figures, you already know. So you're getting your reports, monthly reports, those kind of things all the time. You already know what's going on within your business. I would be doing a bit of a search around, okay, well, how can I improve this particular area? This is the problem that I currently have. How could I use AI to improve that particular area? And then start to advance and look into that. And then once you have a bit of an idea around, okay, these are the core sort of issues that I might have, then it's about, well, who else can I call to help me start to roll this out and develop that. One of the things that I know we've spoken about a lot before, Fergal, is how do you integrate better together as well? So all of these different council groups, whether you do it by region, whether you do it, by state, whatever that might be, but getting closer collaboration with all of you together can then also help generate that buying power that you might need to actually get the right impact that you want for your business as well.
Yeah, I think we talk about that at length, and yeah, we've talked about it, and certainly in our own business, that the ability of councils to collaborate and work together is it's something that a lot of people in other industries don't get. So I think it's a really important thing that, and again, it leads in nicely to my expression of interest request for people who are interested in collaborating with other councils. We're certainly out there and want to facilitate that with some of our existing clients. So anyone on the call with an interest in having a closer look at some of this stuff with their peers across other councils, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it'd be good fun.
yeah. Question here from Jim: which chatbot can I get to do my council reports? Depends how good you want those reports to be, Jim.
Absolutely. But again, it's about how you're collecting that data and information, right? So let's figure that out to then map how you can start to develop that. There's definitely some fantastic tools that are out there that can help you generate those kind of reports. All the way through to things that are checking all your contracts that come through as well, right? So yeah, definitely lots out there. I'm not going to tell you a specific one.
No, well, that's fair enough. I think we'll leave it at that, Belinda. Look, I want to say thanks a million for giving up your time for doing. I know you went out and you were researching what was going on around the place, so it's really been very useful, I'm sure, for everybody on the call. Certainly for me to. I think this is the start of the conversation around AI in local government. I think one of the key things that people need to remember, that this is a wave that is probably only going to escalate in terms of its speed. I know it's very topical and it's a bit of a shiny toy at the minute, but these things will move quicker and continue to move quicker. So I think forming an opinion and having an informed opinion about this is really important for leaders, and they need to keep on top of it. So thank you very much for your insights and your expertise, and maybe we can have you back on again in a year's time. We'll see where AI has got to at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's been great to be able to, like you said, research it in a bit more detail, and also be able to help connect it to how you can transform a business.
Great, thank you, and thank you everybody. We will send out a recording of the session, and we'll announce the next webinar that we have coming up in a couple of months' time as well on that email. So thank you all, and have a good afternoon.